So what I want to do today in the 7 minutes or so that I've been given is to talk a little bit about transportation infrastructures and the centrality of transportation infrastructures to violence and war. We already know that transportation infrastructures, whether it is roads or more recently airports, but also throughout human history, ports and harbor infrastructures have been enormously crucial to the making of states. Actually, for a very brief moment before we all started live streaming, we had a quick little glimpse of the current head of Sadej in Cairo, whose amazing book, that's Pascal Menoret, whose amazing book, Joyriding in Riyadh, actually talks about how important road building was in the mid to late 20th century in Saudi Arabia, in actually consolidating the power of both capital and the state in the city of Riyadh. But my own area of research has always been, in the last 10 or 15 years, has been on the question of maritime infrastructures. And one of the things that becomes very, very clear is that the maritime transportation infrastructures, the harbors where cargo is loaded, and the interim infrastructures for refueling and victualling, feeding ships that travel, was absolutely crucial to the work of colonialism. It was absolutely crucial to the spread of the British Empire and the other European empires throughout the countries of the tricontinent, Africa, Latin America, and in that case also the Spanish and the Portuguese as well, and of course Asia. And we know that those kinds of port and maritime infrastructures have continued to be considered kind of dual use assets. On the one hand, enormously important for commerce, but also very central as strategic assets, not only to the countries in which those transportation infrastructures are located. So, for example, the port of Jabal Ali is considered perhaps the most important port in the Middle East because of the volume of goods that go through it. So it is a strategic asset to the city-state of Dubai. It is also a strategic asset to the United Arab Emirates Confederation, but also very significantly, it is a strategic asset to the United States, which uses Jabal Ali as one of the local ports that it does for sending in troops, for extracting troops, but also for controlling and surveilling the materials that travel by ship. Okay, so we've got this kind of a dual use, this fungibility between the commercial and the strategic, the war making and the money making. And those things really can't be prized apart. Those two things function together, in part because I think the systems that sustain life today in many ways, the systems that, including, for example, maritime infrastructures, that facilitate the arrival of the kinds of goods we need to live, everything from food to the equipment that we need in order to, for example, have clean water, to the kinds of material we need in order to survive, to medications, etc. All of this is absolutely, on the one hand, crucial to our lives, but also constantly threatened by its absorption, or even worse, destruction by machineries of coercion and war. So the example that I would like to end with today, in the couple of minutes that is left to me, is that of the crucial transportation infrastructures in Palestine. We know that part of the incredible landscape of control, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza or in East Jerusalem, have been roads, for example, that are distinguished by who can travel on them, where they start and where they end, for example, or what sorts of checkpoints are placed in them, or whether or not they're bisected or nonsensically end up at some sort of a massive Great Barrier. So we know that those roads are absolutely a part of a network of control by the Israeli state, the Israeli settler colonial state, in all of the places that it has colonized. We also know that in addition to the roads that are existing in this way, control over even the most rudimentary sea accessing, maritime access, harbors or infrastructures in Gaza, for example, are heavily delimited by the state of Israel. But even inside the Green Line, where there are, of course, a lot of the coastal towns were at one point heavily Palestinian populations or majority Palestinian populations, but those maritime infrastructures have been massively curtailed. The access of Palestinians have been massively curtailed by the securitization of those spaces. But speaking of Gaza and the ways in which these life-giving infrastructures are taken and absorbed and transformed into sort of death-dealing infrastructures, is the fact that the moment that there were reserves of gas discovered not 12 miles off the coast of Gaza, we saw the Israeli state come in and limit Palestinian access, for example, fishermen's access, but also others that sort of live by the sea and were hoping to trade by the sea. We see that access being curtailed by the state of Israel. First to 3 nautical miles, and now pretty much the state of Israel shoots at anything that moves beyond 1 nautical mile from the coast. One of the other things that we have seen, and it has been kind of a horrific experience to watch, is the extent to which we hear about sort of the attacks from the air by the Israeli state, which has been absolutely targeted towards all life-giving infrastructures. They have bombed. We know that they have bombed mosques. We know that they have bombed hospitals. We know that they have bombed schools, shelters, and of course residential units. But what is also really interesting is the extent to which we don't hear about this, except if you're looking for it, of how much the Israeli Navy is also shooting from the sea at coastal infrastructures that people in Gaza have had, whether that's harbors where fishing boats are sheltering, or coastal infrastructures such as, for example, leisure areas, restaurants, cafes, things like that, or schools and other kinds of bodies that are located on those coastal areas. What that means is that land and the sea are constantly under assault. And we, of course, also know that Gaza used to have an airport, which the Israelis bombed in 2002 and shut it down, the Yasser Arafat National Airport. And this was long before Hamas came to power. Also, I think this is really important to mention. And I think part of this, and this is the last sentence with which I want to end, is that life-giving infrastructures, transport infrastructures are life-giving, life-facilitating infrastructures. But they are also incredibly crucial for the control of spaces and for states, and in this case, colonial states, for the control of the populations that live under those spaces. And when wars happen, if you either control those life-giving infrastructures or you destroy them. And I think what we're seeing in Gaza, and what is so horrific about it, is that not only do we see the mass murder of tens of thousands of people now, but also of the destruction of the infrastructures that whoever remains would need to have in order to be able to sustain a life there. Thank you very much.